I want 50% of the inheritance, Jard said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk that felt rehearsed, plus equity in your architecture firm. It's only fair. His words floated through the sleek, glass-walled Chicago courtroom, but it was the silence afterward that crushed the air from the room. Jard adjusted the lapel of his Italian suit, a suit I had paid for, and surveyed the audience like a man waiting for applause after a performance. I didn't blink, I didn't gasp. I simply looked at him from across the defendant's table, stunned not by the demand but by the sheer audacity behind it. $3.4 million from my grandmother's estate, and he believed he deserved half because, in his own twisted logic, his lifestyle brand had built my career. My lawyer, Richard, stiffened beside me, ready to speak. I placed a hand on his arm and stopped him. This wasn't a moment for legal objections. This was a moment for clarity. Jard wasn't just greedy. He was delusional, and in that cold courtroom light, glowing with confidence, I finally saw him for what he was. The man I had married wasn't a partner. He was a parasite that had finally grown too large for its host. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Now, let us get into the story to understand how I ended up in that courtroom, staring across the aisle at a man who wanted to dismantle my life. You have to understand what I do for a living. I'm a restoration architect. I take buildings that are cracked, rotting, and forgotten and give them a new spine of steel. I spend my days finding weaknesses that no one else can see, load-bearing walls that look solid but are ready to fail, foundations that are quietly sinking beneath a polished exterior. I am the person people call when they want to save a legacy from turning into rubble. The irony, of course, is that when you spend your life protecting other people's structures, you often forget to protect your own. I met Jard 5 years ago at a gallery opening. I was 33, drained, standing alone in a corner with a glass of lukewarm water, mentally calculating the stress points on a floating staircase. I wasn't hunting for romance. I was searching for an escape route. That was exactly when he found me. Looking back now, I know it wasn't fate, it was reconnaissance. Jard didn't just approach me, he targeted me. He knew who I was. He knew my firm had just landed the St. Regis contract, and he knew I was alone. He didn't use empty pickup lines. He asked me about the cantilever stress on the staircase I was staring at. He spoke my language, and for the next 6 months, he didn't simply date me, he mirrored me. There is a particular vulnerability that affects strong, independent women. We're so used to carrying everything that when someone offers to hold even one bag, it feels like a miracle. I can see the blueprint now. It's called love bombing, but that word doesn't quite fit. What Jard did was more precise. It was an infiltration. He studied my insecurities the way an engineer studies a blueprint. He saw I was tired of making every decision, so he planned everything. He noticed my guilt about working too much, so he praised my ambition, calling me a visionary while gently suggesting that I needed a partner to handle the small things so I could focus on my greatness. He filled the cracks in my foundation with what looked like gold, but was really just cheap, expanding foam. Temporary, fragile, and toxic. He claimed to be a consultant for tech startups, vague enough to sound impressive, conveniently unclear enough to avoid questions. He drove a leased luxury car. He wore watches I later discovered were high-end replicas. He didn't become my partner. He built a character designed to fit perfectly into the empty space beside me. I remember the night he proposed. We were in Paris, a trip he suggested, but I paid for because his funds were tied up in escrow. He looked at me with those practiced, earnest eyes and told me that he did not want to just be my husband. He wanted to be my sanctuary. I said yes. I said yes because I was an expert at spotting rot in timber, but I had no idea how to spot it in a soul. I thought I was building a life. In reality, I was handing the keys to the demolition crew. When the call from the estate lawyer came, I was in the middle of a site visit, wearing a hard hat and shouting over the sound of jackhammers. My grandmother, Eleanor, had passed away 6 months prior. But the probate process had been dragged out due to the complexity of her assets. She was a woman who did not believe in banks. She believed in land, gold, and diverse portfolios. The lawyer told me the final valuation, $3.4 million liquid plus the deed to her brownstone. I remember hanging up the phone and feeling a profound sense of weight, not joy, not excitement, weight. It was a responsibility. It was a legacy. When I told Jard that night, his reaction was instantaneous. There was no solemnity, no respect for the loss that had enabled the gain. there was only hunger. 3.44, he whispered, his eyes wide. Angela, do you know what we can do with this? I corrected him gently. I am going to invest most of it back into the firm, upgrade our software, maybe hire another senior architect. He waved his hand dismissively. That is small thinking, babe. You need to think about the brand, our brand. The next morning, Jard quit his job. He did not discuss it with me. He just came home at noon, tossed his lanyard on the counter, and announced that he was ready to fully commit to managing our portfolio. I was wasting my time there anyway, he said, opening a bottle of champagne. Now I can be your silent partner. I will handle the investments, the networking, the lifestyle. You just keep drawing your little blueprints. I felt a prick of irritation at little blueprints, but I pushed it down. Maybe he was right, maybe I needed help. I was drowning in work, and having someone manage the finances seemed like a relief. That relief lasted exactly 3 weeks. It started with the car, a matte black luxury SUV that cost more than my first year's salary. It is for networking, he argued when I saw it in the driveway. You cannot pull up to a client meeting in a Honda and expect them to trust you with a $10 million restoration. Then came the investments. Jard became obsessed with NFTs and crypto. He spent hours on Discord channels talking about yield farming and floor prices. He transferred $45,000 from our joint account, money I had earmarked for payroll, into a digital wallet. When I confronted him, he did not apologize. He patronized me. You do not understand the future, Angela, he said, scrolling through his phone. This is market research. I am building a diversified portfolio for the firm. You focus on the bricks, let me focus on the cloud. 2 weeks later, the project he invested in was rug pulled. The $45,000 vanished overnight. I sat him down at the kitchen table, the bank statement between us. This has to stop, I said, my voice steady. You are not a financial advisor. You are gambling with my family's legacy. Jard looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Your family's legacy. Who do you think got you the Street Regis contract? Who do you think charmed the board at the gala last month? You are the talent, Angela, but I am the engine. Without my connections, you would still be fixing porches in the suburbs. I am not gambling. I am earning my share. The line between greed and sabotage is thin, and Jard crossed it on a Tuesday. I came into the office early to review the schematics for a new restoration project in the Gold Coast. My studio was quiet, the drafting tables empty, the hum of the servers the only sound. As I walked past the conference room, I noticed a folder left on the table. It was not one of ours. It was a pitch deck titled Vanguard Living. I opened it. It was a business plan for a boutique architecture firm specializing in modern luxury rehabilitations. The aesthetic was a direct ripoff of my signature style, but what made my blood run cold was not the design theft, it was the personnel list. Under proposed senior architects, I saw the names of my 2 most promising junior associates, and under principal founder, I saw Jard's name. He was not just gambling my money. He was trying to poach my team. He was using my capital, the money from my grandmother, to build a competitor that would cannibalize my own firm. I did not scream. I did not confront him. Those reactions belonged to a wife who is heartbroken. I was an architect witnessing a structural failure. I closed the folder and walked into my office. I sat down at my desk and stared at the city skyline, feeling a strange, icy calm settle over me. This was not a marriage anymore. It was a hostile takeover. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I had saved years ago but never used. Richard, I said when he answered, it is Angela. We need to talk. Richard was a shark. He did not believe in amicable separations. He believed in autopsies. We met for lunch at a steakhouse where the waiters knew not to interrupt. I laid out everything. The inheritance, the car, the crypto loss, the pitch deck. You have a prenup, right? He asked, cutting into his ribeye. Yes, I said. We signed it 5 years ago. He barely looked at it. Good, Richard said, but we need more. If he is trying to poach your staff and use your funds for a competing business, that is a breach of fiduciary duty. If he is acting as your manager, we need to document everything. Every text, every email, every transaction. We are going to build a cage around him, Angela, and we are going to let him walk right into it. That night I went home and cooked dinner. I asked Jard about his day. I smiled when he talked about his big plans for the future. I think we are really close to a breakthrough, babe, he said, pouring himself a glass of my vintage red. I can feel it. I can feel it too, I said, sipping my water. Under the table, my phone buzzed with a notification from the security app I had installed on his laptop while he was in the shower. It was a log of his keystrokes. I was watching him build his own coffin, one lie at a time. The courtroom air was so still, I could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Jard sat across from me, radiating the kind of confidence that only comes from profound ignorance. His lawyer, a man who clearly charged by the syllable, stood up to make his closing argument. "Your Honor," he began, gesturing grandly towards Jard. "While my client may not have contributed financially in the traditional sense, his intangible contributions, his networking, his lifestyle curation, his brand were the catalyst for Miss Angela's success. He was the wind beneath her wings. I saw the judge, a woman with eyes like flint, suppress a grimace. When it was my turn, I did not make a speech. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked to the bench. I placed a single thick envelope on the judge's desk. "What is this?" the judge asked. "Evidence, Your Honor," Richard said from beside me, "of a prenuptial agreement signed 5 years ago stipulating total separation of assets." Jard laughed, a short, sharp bark of amusement. "That old thing, I did not even read it. It is void, duress, or whatever." The judge opened the envelope. She pulled out the prenup, her eyes scanning the signatures. Then she pulled out the second document I had included. It was a printout from my home security system, a log of digital activity from our shared home network dated 3 weeks prior. "And this?" the judge asked, holding up the log. "That," Richard said, his voice slicing through the room, "is record of Mr. Jard attempting to access my client's private digital vault. Specifically, the folder labeled legal documents. He tried 27 different password combinations. He knew the prenup existed, Your Honor. He was trying to find it and delete it." Jard's smirk vanished. It did not fade, it was deleted. His face went slack. He looked at his lawyer, then at me, then at the judge. The realization hit him like a physical blow. I had not just protected myself. I had baited a trap, and he had walked right into it. The judge looked at Jard over the rim of her glasses. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she let out a sound that was not quite a laugh, but was far more devastating. It was a scoff. "Mr. Jard," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "it appears your lifestyle curation did not include basic cybersecurity." "Your Honor," Jard's lawyer stammered, "this evidence is inadmissible, my client." "Your client," the judge interrupted, her voice sharp as glass, "committed digital trespassing. But let us return to the matter of assets." She turned back to the prenup. Jard was still frozen, his mouth slightly open, a look of pure, unadulterated cognitive dissonance on his face. It was not just fear, it was a system failure. His brain, wired to believe he was the protagonist of every story, could not compute a reality where he was the villain who got caught. He looked like a computer trying to divide by zero. According to Clause 14, the judge read, "All debts incurred individually during the marriage remain the sole responsibility of the individual." She picked up another stack of papers from the envelope. The credit card statements I had compiled. "Mr. Jard," she said, looking over her glasses, "you have accumulated $15,000 in personal debt, the leased luxury vehicle, the failed crypto investments, the credit cards maxed out on lifestyle expenses. You assumed these would be absorbed by the marital estate." Jard nodded dumbly. "We were partners, not according to this," she said, tapping the prenup. "This court rules that the prenuptial agreement is valid. Miss Angela retains 100% of her inheritance and her business equity, and you, sir, retain 100% of your debt." She banged the gavel. The sound was like a gunshot in a library. Case closed. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. Jard slumped in his chair, the golden boy facade dissolving into gray, panicked reality. He was not a partner. He was not a co-founder. He was just a man with a leased car he could not afford and a debt he could not pay. As I stood up to leave, I looked at him one last time. He did not look back. He was staring at the table, his world collapsing inward. I walked out of the courtroom, my heels clicking on the marble floor, a rhythm of absolute, unshakable freedom. The collapse of Jard's empire was swift and public. When the court transcripts were released, because Richard, in his infinite wisdom, ensured they were part of the public record, Jard's personal brand disintegrated. The investors he had courted for his spin-off firm vanished. The junior architects he tried to poach came back to me apologizing profusely, claiming they were manipulated. I did not fire them, but I did not trust them either. Trust, once broken, requires a complete tear-down to rebuild. Jard moved back in with his parents. His leased SUV was repossessed. The last I heard, he was trying to sell consulting services on LinkedIn, but his reputation was radioactive. He sent me a few emails, long rambling screeds about how I had ruined his potential, but I never replied. I just forwarded them to Richard and let the legal system handle the rest. I did not keep the money he tried to steal. I did not want it. It felt tainted, like timber infested with termites. Instead, I took the exact amount he had demanded, plus the value of the debt I had avoided, and I created something new, the Aliner Scholarship. It was not just a fund, it was a lifeline. I designed it specifically for women escaping financial abuse, providing them with the resources to rebuild their lives from the ground up: legal aid, housing, education. I named it after my grandmother because she taught me that a legacy is not just what you leave behind, it is what you build while you are still here. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood on the roof of a new project site, the wind whipping my hair. I looked out at the city, at the skyline I was helping to shape. I was not just an architect anymore. I was a sewer. I had taken the poison Jard tried to feed me and turned it into fertilizer for a garden he would never be allowed to enter. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who built shelters for everyone but herself. She was gone. In her place stood a woman who understood that the most important structure you will ever build is your own self-worth, and this time the foundation was solid. If you believe that protecting your peace is the highest form of self-love, hit that like button and share this story. Someone out there needs to know they can walk away.